My earliest memory of the Sabbath was 42 years ago, and I was 6 years old. I didn't know it was the Sabbath at the time, but what I remember was how the mood in our home would change on Friday evening. At the time, my father would go away to work for the week, and he would come back on Friday. And when he came home, the mood of the home was suddenly very troubled. And he was a very violent man. And it would begin a weekend where we as children, 4 of us, would witness my mother being beaten up. And I remember at 6 years old, seeing my mom sitting at the table with her eyes swollen and black and blue, and my father taking a pot of rice and peas that my mother had been cooking that afternoon and dumping it over her head. And I remember at 6 years old looking at that and knowing it was wrong, and standing there frightened and having tears streaming down my eyes and saying to myself, this is wrong. And when I grow up, I'm going to get married, and I'm going to do it right. What I want to do for the sermonette this morning is exhort all of us to make this a feast of family unity. We are here to celebrate the millennial rule of Jesus Christ. And that government that Jesus Christ will usher in is a family government. Let's see that in Isaiah 9. Isaiah 9, Deacon Smith took us here yesterday, and he was in verse 7, speaking of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end. I'd like us to go to verse 6. Where verse 6 it says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. This is family language. Family language. A child is born unto us, a son is given. And the government, a family government, shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father. This is family language. We have a son that's going to become a father. Implication here being he's going to be married. There's a wife involved. Husband, wife, father, son. This is a family government that is united. Let's see the type of love that a man should have for his wife just a few pages back in the Song of Solomon, chapter 4. We realize that the family is an institution, and it is a mind-shaping institution. When we create a family, we are creating an institution that will shape the minds of the members of that family. And that's the very same thing that God's government, God's family government, is going to do. And so this love between a husband and a wife is critical to any society. And we see an example of that here in the Song of Solomon, chapter 4, and we'll break into it at verse 9. Speaking of his wife, you have ravished my heart, my sister in the faith, my spouse. You have ravished my heart with one of your eyes, one chain of your neck. How fair is your love. My sister, my spouse. How much better is your love than wine. I know some men can't believe this, but it is better than wine. And the smell of your ointments than all spices. Your lips, O my spouse, drop as the honeycomb. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the smell of your garments is like the smell of Lebanon. This is true love that a man is expressing for his spouse, his sister in the faith. And so we see here, men, the standard with which we are to conduct ourselves in loving our wives. But knowing that this is a spiritual mystery, the love between a husband and a wife, we also gain some insight into how much Jesus Christ loves the church. He is ravished. His heart is ravished by the church. He loves this church. And so, brethren, we must have this same perspective of the church. It's Christ's wife. And there must be unity in the church. Let's contrast this over in Galatians. Galatians 5, where we receive a warning. Galatians 5 and verse 15 says, "But if you bite and devour one another, take heed that you be not consumed one of another." I remember when we got our dog 10 years ago, we were not a dog family. We didn't know anything about dogs, but we thought it would be good for the kids to have a dog. And so we went and we got this puppy. And since we didn't know anything about raising puppies, we decided to take the puppy to dog school, or to take ourselves to dog school. And one of the first things that they did was have all the puppies get into a ring together. And they said this was an important socialization for the dogs because they had to learn bite inhibition. They had to be with other dogs, and even though their instinct is to bite, they had to learn to inhibit that bite. Well, our dog was in there, and there was another dog, a very big dog, a German Shepherd, called Maximus. And the owner was a small woman who, the way she would talk to the dog was, "Maximus! Maximus! No, Maximus!" Well, Maximus didn't listen, and he failed that class. But God doesn't speak to us like that. Here, in verse 15, it's a warning. He says, "Take heed! Take heed! If you bite and devour one another, take heed that you be not consumed one of another." That word consumed, brethren, is the Greek word analysko, and it means destroyed. That if we bite and devour one another, take heed that we don't destroy each other and take each other out of the family of God. God will not tolerate it. So it's quite a warning. It's one thing for a man to abuse his wife. It's another thing altogether for a man or a woman to abuse Christ's wife. Let none of us be guilty of abusing Christ's wife. Let's see the kind of unity that God wants to see in his church over in Psalm. I think you know where I'm going. Psalm 133. A beautiful psalm. We go from the warning, pay attention, take heed. We don't want to be like someone. It's better for us to have a millstone around our neck and thrown into the depths of the sea. So we go from take heed to behold. Something else we should pay attention to. Behold. What should we pay attention to? Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. This is something that is so good and so pleasant to God that he wants us to stop and pay attention. It's beautiful. This word dwell is the Hebrew word yashab, and it means to sit down. It means to remain. It means to settle, to tarry. God wants us here in this Feast of Tabernacles to tabernacle together, to take time, to slow down, spend time with one another. And then he tells us just how good and how pleasant this is when we spend time in unity with one another. Here's how good and how pleasant it is. It is like the precious ointment upon the head that ran down upon the beard, even Aaron's beard, that went down into the skirts of his garment. This is precious ointment. But what they were doing with Aaron was so important that this precious ointment was poured in abundance on Aaron's head to separate him and make him the high priest. That is what it is like when we spend time together in unity. We sanctify ourselves, or we allow God to sanctify us, I should say. We become separate from everybody else. By this shall all men know that you're my disciples, when you love one another. It's like this precious oil. What else is it like? It's as the dew of Hermon, and as the dew that descended upon the mountains of Zion. So again, we have this downward motion, that it's oil that comes down, it's dew that comes down, it's a blessing that comes down from heaven. It's as the dew of Hermon and as the dew that descended upon the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord commanded the blessing, even life forevermore. He didn't just give the blessing, he commanded the blessing. And when we dwell together in unity, that's what this is like. It moves God so much that he commands a blessing upon our congregation. So what can we do, brethren, to make this a feast of family unity? First, let's make sure we take the time to strengthen our physical families. We're not rushing around school, work. We can spend time together and strengthen those bonds. And then let's strengthen the spiritual family. We can come a bit earlier and fellowship. We can stay a bit later and fellowship. We can sign up for the activities and fellowship, and tarry, and spend time one with another. If we don't participate in this program of unity and peace, God puts us together and says, learn bite inhibition. But if we're like Maximus and we don't learn, it's okay. God says all things work together for good, for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. This early life that I had, very troubled beginnings, I think it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. That it helped me really, truly evaluate and understand the power of family. It also helped me witness some of the greatest qualities I've ever seen in a human being, and that is my mother, as she rose out of this depth of despair and took 4 children with her. And it was just an amazing thing for me to grow up and watch and witness. And I believe that's a part of me now. And I do want to just extend a thank you to those of you involved in Infuse, who will be involved in the community service on Monday, helping single mothers. And I hope this message sort of personalizes this for you. There are real people in need of real help in circumstances that are beyond their control. And so it's a great thing for you to reach out and help. Brethren, we might be spiritual children, but we can still form a vision of a world without division. We might be spiritual children, but we can learn the principles of unity and peace and how to get along with each other so that we can form that family government that Jesus Christ is going to usher in. Let's not abuse the wife of Christ. Brethren, behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity.